Roma locuta est, causa finita est. You know, it's an ancient, incredibly powerful Latin phrase, and it's been echoing through centuries of Catholic history. Roughly translated, it means, Rome has spoken, the case is closed. For hundreds of years, this phrase basically set the ultimate ground rule. It means that once the Vatican, or specifically the Pope, makes a final decision on something, that's it. There is absolutely zero room left for argument, debate, or appeal. The gavel has literally fallen. But what happens when a modern group decides to, well, test the absolute limits of that ancient rule?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a truly fascinating, high-stakes legal chess match that is happening right now inside the Catholic Church. We're looking at this historic clash between the Vatican and a traditionalist Catholic group known as the Society of St. Pius X, or the SSPX. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theological disagreement. No, it is a hugely complex administrative and legal battle that's literally testing the very boundaries of church law and absolute authority. To understand how we got here, we really have to look back at this incredibly rapid sequence of events from July 2026. The inciting incident? Well, it happened when the SSPX ordained 4 new bishops in Switzerland. But here's the catch. They did this entirely without the Pope's permission. And Rome's reaction? Swift and severe. On July 2nd, the Vatican officially declared those bishops excommunicated, stating the SSPX was in a formal state of schism. But the SSPX, they didn't just accept this. On July 11th, they fired back with a formal legal appeal, which triggered the massive institutional showdown we're seeing today. Part 1. Rome has spoken. Let's break down exactly what that Vatican reaction actually meant. Because when Rome laid down the law on July 2nd, they went straight for the heaviest penalties available in their entire legal system. The Vatican officially accused the SSX of schism. Now, what does that mean? It's basically a formal split or breakaway from the Catholic Church. In the eyes of Rome, by ordaining those bishops without the Pope's explicit okayed mandate, the SSX wasn't just breaking some minor administrative rule, they were actively severing their ties with the church hierarchy. The spiritual and legal weight of being declared in a state of schism, along with outright excommunication, is just massive. It's the church's way of formally and firmly closing the door. Part 2. The SSPX strikes back. And honestly, here's where the story gets really fascinating. Instead of just walking away or staging protests, the SSPX struck back, and they did it in the most surprising way possible, by using the church's very own highly complex legal system, known as Canon Law, right against it. So, on July 11th, the SSPX executed 2 incredibly precise administrative maneuvers to fight their penalty. Step 1 relies on Canon 1734, which is essentially the request to reconsider. You see, under church law, you can't just skip the line and appeal straight to the Pope. You actually have to formally ask the specific department that punished you, in this case the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, or the DDF, to change its mind. Then we have step 2, which relies on Canon 1353. We can basically think of this one as the pause button. Now, regarding that first step, talk about an incredible amount of pressure. Under Canon Law, once a penalty is issued, you only have exactly 10 days to formally request that the DDF reconsider its decision. Just 10 days. That is an incredibly tight window for a sprawling international organization to mount a major legal defense. And yet, the SSPX actually beat the clock. They filed their meticulous legal request in just 9 days, successfully securing their right to challenge the Vatican. And this perfectly illustrates why hitting that 10-day deadline was so absolutely vital. By filing on time, the SSPX activated that Canon 1353 we mentioned earlier. Under this specific rule, when a person or a group formally appeals an official punishment, that punishment is legally suspended. It's put on hold while the case is being reviewed. So, the SSPX is currently using this pause button to argue that, technically and legally speaking, their excommunications are not actually active right now. This clever administrative technicality allows them to turn around and reassure their followers that they are still legally operating and administering sacraments. Part 3. The canonical defense. So, they bought themselves some time, but what is their actual argument here? How exactly do they justify ordaining bishops without papal approval? Let's take a closer look at their canonical defense, keeping a strictly impartial eye on how they are interpreting church law to claim their innocence. The very first pillar of their defense relies on Canons 1323 and 1324, arguing what's called a state of necessity. See, the SSPX firmly believes that the Catholic Church is currently enduring a massive spiritual crisis, and that traditional Catholic teachings are essentially being destroyed.
According to these specific laws, if a person breaks a rule because they sincerely believe it's the absolute only way to save souls, they can't be excommunicated. So they're arguing that this extreme perceived spiritual necessity legally shields them from Rome's punishment. The second pillar of their defense draws a really sharp line between mere disobedience and actually splitting from the Church. Let's contrast these two perspectives. The Vatican views the unapproved ordinations as an act of permanent schism, meaning a complete refusal to obey and a total severing of ties. The SSPX, however, argues they haven't formally broken away at all. They frame their actions as an act of disobedience. They're quick to point out that they still publicly recognize the Pope's authority and even pray for him, arguing that a disciplinary infraction is a very different thing from formally splitting from the Church entirely. Part 4. The Papal Wildcard. While the SSPX is playing a remarkably smart and technically precise legal game, their strategy contains one major, inescapable flaw. It's the ultimate trump card in the Catholic Church: absolute power.
We can basically call this the legal wall, because no matter how many pause buttons you manage to press, these three staggering canon laws override pretty much everything. Canon 331 dictates that the Pope is the supreme judge and lawmaker of the Church. Canon 1404 explicitly states that the first see is judged by no one, meaning the Pope answers to no earthly court. And then Canon 1629 cements all of this by stating there is absolutely no appeal against a decision made by the Pope. It is an overwhelming, completely unappealable concentration of legal authority. Part 5. The final ultimatum. And this brings us right to the climax of this explainer. Because right now, we are sitting in a highly charged legal stalemate. The SSPX believes they're fully protected by their administrative pause, but Rome holds all the ultimate authority. So, how exactly does this standoff resolve?
Well, the Vatican's doctrine office now has to make their next move, and realistically, they only have two choices. Option 1, they can just engage the normal legal process. They reject the appeal on legal grounds, which then allows the SSPX to escalate the case to the Church's highest administrative court, dragging the whole battle out for who knows how long. Or option 2, they deploy the papal wildcard. The Vatican could just ask Pope Leo XIV to personally step in and sign the excommunication decree in forma specific. If the Pope personally signs it, that instantly cuts through all the bureaucracy. The pause button is completely destroyed, and the SSPX's legal maneuvers are instantly over. So, the crucial point to take away from all this is that if Rome uses that papal wildcard, the dispute completely transcends all these legal technicalities we've been talking about. The SSPX will be left backed into a corner with two incredibly drastic existential paths. Path A is unconditional submission. They'd have to accept the Pope's authority over their bishops and fully submit to the modern Church's rules. Or Path B, permanent schism. They reject the Pope's personal ruling and operate entirely outside of the Catholic Church as a formal, permanent breakaway group. The SSPX has undeniably used canon law brilliantly to delay their punishment, but they can't ultimately override the supreme authority of the Pope. Sooner or later, Rome is going to have the final unappealable word. Looking at the sheer gravity of this stalemate, I want to leave you with a provocative question drawn straight from our source material. In a clash where precise legal strategy meets absolute power, what is your advice for the SSPX and what is your advice for Rome? Really think about that as we wait to see who makes the next move on this historic chessboard. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.